Right. Hello, my name's Myra McMurtry, and if that big bush wasn't in the way, you could see on my tombstone that I was born on October the 9th, 1912, and I passed away on March the 19th, 1989. But I think it's what happened in between that you're here to hear about tonight. Now, I'm going to apologize if this doesn't go very smooth because you see, I'm not very comfortable talking about myself. I always kind of felt like it was bragging or tooting your own horn. So tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself through the eyes of my children. That might make it seem a little bit easier for me. I was born Myra Blanche Ralph, and my parents were John Lafayette Ralph and Effie Alice Gilliam. Now, I was one of 12 children, and I sort of like to play this memory game with myself to see if I can remember their names. There were 5 boys: Luther, Roy, Bennett, Alfred, and Jim. So there were 7 of us girls: Hetty, Laura, Lillian, Eva, Mildred, my twin sister, and me. We grew up on a little farm on Long Hollow Pike that was about 4 miles outside of the city of Goodlettsville, up on a little bit of a hill. Now, with those 12 children, you know, my parents were trying to raise us right, so they brought us to church every single Sunday. I think mostly to give us a good Christian background, but also to get a break from us. Well, something about that church must have stuck, because when I was 12 years old, I was alone in the garden there at home, and I felt Jesus right next to me. And it was at that minute that I accepted Him into my heart as my Lord and Savior, and that was pretty much the defining moment for the rest of my life. When it came time to marry, I married a local boy, Mr. Barry McMurtry, and together we had 6 children, half as many as my parents, but still more than a handful. Our children were Ted, Harriet, Bobby, Lucy, Patricia, and Ronnie. Now, if you're a member of a big family, I'm sure that you know that there's always something going on. And there's lots of family stories, but the one that I want to share with you tonight I think is kind of funny. So, we all stuck together in the community back then, and we had a neighbor who was barbecuing a goat, and she invited everybody over to eat dinner with her. So, being a good neighbor, I had to go early, and I took little Ronnie along with me so we could help her get ready. Well, after we'd had our meal, Ted came up and said, "Mother, I think I'm going to leave now," and he thanked everybody for inviting him, and he was going to go on into Goodlettsville. Well, little Ronnie came up to me and he said, "Mama, I am so tired. Would it be all right for Ted to just take me home?" Now, I think you could ask all of my children and they would say that I was a pretty no-nonsense mother, and my instructions to Ted that night were very clear. He was to go inside of the house and make sure Harriet was at home before he left little Ronnie. Well, I'm sure it wasn't the first time that he totally ignored me, but he didn't do what I had asked him to do. In fact, he just let Ronnie off at the end of the driveway. So this might be a good time to tell you that Barry and I had bought the old Ralph home place where I was born, and lots of people said that house was haunted. When little Ronnie got up to the top of the hill in the pitch black dark and decided that he was there all by himself with the ghost, he decided it'd be safer to go inside of the barn and spend the night with the mule. So that's what he did, climbed up into the hayloft and fell asleep. Well, when Barry and I got back that evening to an empty house, we called out all of the neighbors in the holler, and we were all looking for little Ronnie. Finally, Mr. Harvey Kaiser said, "I'm going to go shine my big flashlight up in that barn and see what I can see." And he saw a little plank where Ronnie had pried open the loft and gone up there to go to sleep, and little Angel had slept through his own moment of glory. Now, sleeping outside wasn't anything unusual for my children. You see, that old house remained pretty much unchanged since my days as a little girl. Now, Barry and I, we made a few improvements. We upgraded the electrical. We did add running water and eventually an inside bathroom. But the one thing we never put in was air conditioning. And mind you, I cooked 3 meals a day, every day, for my family of 8. So in the summer, by the time we finished supper, the inside of that house would be so hot you couldn't stand it. Well, after we'd cleaned up all of the dishes, I would get a great big quilt and we'd take it outside and spread it out on the grass, and the children and I would lay on our backs and look up at the stars. We'd talk about our day and our dreams, and if it got cool enough, we'd go back inside, and if it didn't, we'd just sleep right there outside on the yard. Those were some good times with us. Now, much like my parents, I raised my children up to love the Lord and follow the law. Mostly I tried to do this by example, but I'm not going to lie. Every now and then I needed some help from a switch I'd cut off of the peach tree. Isn't there something in the Bible that says if you spare the rod, you spoil the child? Well, I took that to heart. Now, church didn't end on Sundays for me, no, not at all, because I was a part of the CPW, the Cumberland Presbyterian Women. And I was very active in that group, served as almost every officer that you could be. There was one year that I was responsible for putting a rose on the piano every time we had a new baby born into the congregation. Now, mind you, we didn't have email and text and automated phone trees back then, so you really had to be on top of it, because if you missed the birth of a baby and that grandparent didn't have a rose on the piano, you were in hot water. And then there was one year that my friend Irene Roberts and I were chosen to be delegates to go to the CPW National Convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We packed our bags and got on an airplane and went out there for a whole week. Now, we did have lots of meetings and stuff, but we also got to do some sightseeing. I really enjoyed that trip. And then later in my life, I was a member of the Beach Nuts. Now, I guess I could fudge a little bit and say that we too were all about Christian fellowship, but really, we were just a bunch of older ladies who got together once a month, ate lunch, and played rook. We did have a prayer, though, before we ate our meal, so I guess you could say that was Christian fellowship. And those old ladies were something else. Why, I remember one time I got here to the meeting and they were all looking at the floor of the church sanctuary, just squealing and carrying on. So I walked up to see what was the ruckus, and it was just a little old chicken snake. So as calm as I could, I just opened up the side door, picked up a rake, scooped up the chicken snake and took him out into the prayer garden and set him free. Then I came back and shut the door and said, "Now, can we play cards?" Of course, now as a Christian, what you really want to do is find ways to serve others. And the way that I served others is what I like to call Myra's taxi service. With all those brothers and sisters, somebody was always needing a ride to the doctor or the grocery store or the bank. But I didn't stop with my family. No, I tried to help everybody that I could. We had a little neighbor child who had a speech impairment, and he needed to go to the Bill Wilkerson Hearing and Speech Center every single week. And I took him to his appointment every single week until he could talk to you just as smooth as Bill Clinton. But now what most people will remember me for is the way that I treated Miss Ruth Perry. Miss Ruth was the widow of my third grade teacher, Mr. Charlie Perry. And I don't mean to speak ill of anyone, but I'm going to tell you, you'd be hard-pressed to find very many people who could call Miss Ruth their friend. Well, that's the kind of person that needs you the most, right? So I really took good care of Miss Ruth. When she was still able to travel, I'd take her to the grocery store and the doctor and the bank. And then when she became homebound, I brought to her her groceries and her medicine and made sure she had what she needed. And then eventually when she had to go to the nursing home, I went to see her every single week to make sure she had what she needed there. Well, my friends, our time together is coming to an end. But there is one more thing I want to share about myself. I had a plaque on the wall in my kitchen, and it said this: "Do something, lead, follow, or get out of the way." And I like to think that I was smart enough, wise enough to do what I needed to do each of those situations throughout my life. Thank you all for stopping by.